The Gulf just caught fire, and not just figuratively. An explosion rocked the waters of the Persian Gulf this morning. A classified U.S. oil rig, unknown to the public, unknown to even many in the intelligence community, was hit, not by accident, not by rebels, but by Iranian drones, direct, deliberate, and deadly. This wasn't a warning shot. This was an act of war. And the U.S. didn't sit back. Within 3 hours, the U.S. Navy launched a full retaliatory strike, targeting Iranian drone infrastructure with precision-guided munitions. Navy destroyers lit up the skies. Drones swarmed like hornets. Bombers took flight from carriers already stationed in the region. It was a show of dominance, not a debate. But let's rewind what exactly happened. The attack. Iran crosses the line. At 3:27 local time, a swarm of 6 Iranian Shahed 191 drones pierced Gulf airspace, flying low under radar. Their target? A classified offshore U.S. oil extraction platform rumored to be feeding covert energy channels to allied forces in the region. The rig, guarded lightly, wasn't built for war. It was built for logistics, for power, for fuel. 2 drones were intercepted by early warning systems aboard a nearby support vessel. 4 got through. Direct hits. Explosions tore through the rig's midsection. Black smoke poured into the morning sky. Emergency beacons went off. Communications went dead. Within minutes, oil began spilling into the sea flames, licking the water. The message from Tehran? Crystal clear. This was payback. For sanctions, for covert U.S. operations in Syria, for 1,000 little cuts. But the U.S. message came even faster and louder. Retaliation. Shock and awe returns. Within 180 minutes, the U.S. response was airborne. From USS Gerald R. Ford, strike drones launched with target coordinates already locked. Tomahawk missiles were fired from destroyers stationed near the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon ordered Operation Steel Tide to commence an immediate, targeted retaliation focused on Iran's drone command centers. Satellite data confirmed the strike hit a key drone launch base near Bandar Abbas. Another target near Isfahan, suspected to house Shahed drone production facilities, was obliterated. Precision strikes, minimal civilian casualties, maximum damage. The retaliation wasn't just a hit, it was a message. You don't touch American assets without consequences. And it was just the beginning. Deployment. Warships mobilize in full force. The U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, moved into battle-ready posture. Within hours, USS Bataan, an amphibious assault ship, was seen deploying F-35Bs off its deck. Submarines like USS Georgia, armed with cruise missiles, repositioned to strategic zones. Carrier strike groups were rerouted. Drone swarms expanded their patrol radius. War games suddenly became war plans. And then came the full mobilization. Navy SEALs, Marine Expeditionary Units, electronic warfare aircraft, all placed on alert. The Gulf was no longer a shipping route, it was a war zone. The world watched. The White House didn't blink. Neither did the Pentagon. Inside the command center, real-time warfare. Sources from inside CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, described the situation room as controlled chaos. Dozens of screens tracked drone patterns, radar anomalies, and Iranian fleet movements. AI-assisted software highlighted threat clusters. Human analysts double-checked target profiles. Cyber teams intercepted Iranian military chatter confirming that the drone launch was state-sanctioned, not rogue, not deniable, ordered, planned, executed. That gave Washington the green light for open military response under existing U.S. military protocol. President's response? 3 words. Strike, then escalate. Iranian reaction? We're ready. Iran's official state TV confirmed the U.S. strike but accused Washington of aggression against sovereign territory. Brigadier General Esmail Khani, commander of the Quds Force, declared, "If America wants war in the Gulf, we are ready." Ready? Maybe. Prepared? That's another question. Iran's navy, although numerous, lacks the blue water capability of the U.S. fleet. Its missile systems are fast but less accurate. Its drones are growing in range but can't match U.S. stealth. And when it comes to intelligence, there's no contest. Still, the regime thrives on chaos. And chaos is here. Global reactions, shockwaves across capitals. London called it deeply concerning. Moscow called it provoked by U.S. interference. Beijing urged de-escalation while quietly increasing oil stockpiles. Israel, however, didn't hold back. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, "Iran just tested American resolve. What they got was American fire." Meanwhile, OPEC held an emergency session. Oil futures surged past 110 per barrel, with analysts fearing a broader conflict could push prices past 140. Tankers were rerouted. Insurance premiums for Gulf shipping quadrupled overnight, and the stock markets read across the board. Strategic deterrence, not just retaliation. A warning. The U.S. Navy strike wasn't just revenge, it was deterrence. By targeting drone bases inside Iranian territory without hitting civilian infrastructure, Washington sent a clear signal: we can strike precisely, surgically, and fast. But they also left room for diplomacy. No nuclear sites were hit, no IRGC headquarters, no strikes in Tehran. Calculated force, strategic messaging, cold-blooded precision. The Pentagon wants Iran to think twice, not to collapse. The message: do not escalate. But if you do, we're 10 moves ahead. What's next? Escalation or standoff? As of now, U.S. warships remain on high alert. More troops are reportedly being flown into bases in Qatar, Kuwait, and Diego Garcia. And behind closed doors, the U.S. is urging Gulf allies to share intel, secure ports, and prepare for asymmetric retaliation, like cyber attacks or proxy militia strikes. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is reportedly arming Houthi forces in Yemen with new drones. Hezbollah has raised readiness in southern Lebanon, and Iraqi Shia militias are calling for resistance operations against U.S. forces. This isn't just about one oil rig. This is about control of the Gulf, about energy dominance, about signaling strength in a multipolar world. The bigger picture: missile age of the Navy. This entire episode reveals something deeper. We are living in a missile-dominated era of naval warfare. The drone that hit the U.S. rig? Cheap, autonomous, hard to intercept. The U.S. retaliation? Costly but surgically effective. Modern conflict isn't about full invasions, it's about pinpoint pressure. One drone strike can cause $1 billion ripple. One missile strike can reshape oil markets, elections, alliances. And in this missile age, the U.S. Navy is adapting fast. Hypersonics are being tested, lasers are being deployed on ships, drone interceptors, AI command centers, and satellite-linked destroyers are becoming the standard. This is no longer about naval power alone, it's about tech dominance in sea-based combat. Final word: tensions rising and they're not going away. This attack was not a fluke. This retaliation was not the end. What we're watching now is the early stage of a military chess game in the world's most volatile energy corridor. A single wrong move could escalate to full-blown regional war. But a calculated strategy could cement U.S. dominance for the next decade. The U.S. has responded, the Navy has flexed. But Iran still holds cards, proxies, choke points, and asymmetric warfare. Will cooler heads prevail, or are we entering the next phase of conflict in the Gulf? One thing is certain: this is no longer just diplomacy. This is a war of signals, of drones, of missiles, of deterrence. And the Navy is on the front line. The moment Iran's drones struck the secret U.S. oil rig in the Gulf, the entire region held its breath. But if you think the U.S. response so far, calculated precision strikes on drone bases, is the end of the story, think again. Washington still holds the cards. The next move could reshape the entire Middle East. If the United States decides to go beyond deterrence and into full-scale retaliation, the consequences will be fast, brutal, and potentially historic. So what would that look like? First, the United States would likely initiate a massive air and sea campaign focused entirely on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities. This would not be about toppling the government or full occupation. It would be about permanently crippling Iran's ability to launch drone, missile, or naval attacks against American interests. The opening move would involve wave after wave of Tomahawk missiles launched from U.S. destroyers and submarines already stationed in the Gulf. These missiles would target known drone factories, ammunition depots, mobile missile launchers, and radar facilities in western and central Iran. Simultaneously, U.S. Air Force stealth bombers operating out of Diego Garcia or Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar would begin deep penetration strikes against hardened military bunkers and intelligence centers. The goal would be to blind Iran's eyes, break its hands, and disable its trigger fingers all before it can even respond. At sea, the U.S. Navy would not hesitate. Carrier strike groups led by supercarriers like the USS Gerald R. Ford or USS Dwight D. Eisenhower would unleash F/A-18 Super Hornets and F-35C stealth fighters. Their mission: sweep the skies clean of Iranian drones, suppress enemy air defenses, and secure air superiority over the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, American attack submarines would slip beneath the waves, hunting down Iranian naval assets. Iran's fast attack boats, often used in swarming tactics, would be systematically destroyed. Missile boats and mine layers hiding in small ports along the southern coast would be bombarded or sunk before they ever left the dock. But even if the US succeeds in degrading Iran's military power, that doesn't mean Iran would go quietly. On the contrary, this kind of escalation would unleash a wave of asymmetric retaliation. Iran doesn't need to win a conventional war to cause havoc. Its real power lies in its network of proxies across the region. Within hours, Iranian-backed groups would likely begin striking US personnel and assets in Iraq, Syria, and even as far as Bahrain. Militias like Kataib Hezbollah and Asaib Ahl al-Haq have been stockpiling rockets and explosives for years, and they'd finally have the excuse to use them. US bases could come under rocket fire. Convoys might be hit with roadside bombs. American soldiers would once again be fighting in the shadows, this time under the banner of a much wider conflict. And it wouldn't stop there. Iran would almost certainly activate Hezbollah in Lebanon, its most powerful and experienced proxy. Israel would immediately brace for rocket barrages across its northern frontier. Civilian populations in Tel Aviv and Haifa would be forced into shelters. Israel's Iron Dome would light up the sky, but sustained fire from Hezbollah's vast missile arsenal could overwhelm defenses. If the war expands to include Israel, the scope of US involvement could widen further, potentially forcing American forces to operate jointly with the IDF in targeting Hezbollah's supply lines in Syria. Meanwhile, the global economy would be thrown into chaos. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most vital energy choke point, a narrow sea lane through which nearly 20% of the planet's oil supply flows. If Iran retaliates by attempting to block or mine the strait, shipping would come to a standstill. Oil prices would surge past $150 per barrel within hours. Global markets would panic. Insurance costs for oil tankers would become unaffordable. Inflation, already a problem in much of the West, would spike even further, triggering panic in energy-dependent economies. And while the US has its own reserves, allies in Europe and Asia would feel the shock immediately. We're not just talking about gas prices here. We're talking about an economic tremor that could ripple through every major economy on Earth. The chaos wouldn't be limited to physical battlegrounds either. Cyber warfare would erupt behind the scenes. Iran's elite hacker units known for targeting infrastructure would likely attempt coordinated cyber attacks on US energy grids, airports, and financial institutions. While the US is far more advanced in cyber defense, the risk of disruption is real. A single attack on a major energy pipeline or water purification facility could trigger mass panic not just in America, but across any ally country tied to the conflict. And yet, the most dangerous wildcard remains the nuclear question. Iran has long denied it is building a nuclear bomb. But if it feels cornered, if it believes its regime is on the brink, it may throw out every agreement it's ever signed. It could restart uranium enrichment to weapons-grade levels in full public view, daring the world to stop it. The US would then face a terrible choice: launch strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities and risk full-blown regional war, or allow Iran to get closer to a bomb and risk an arms race in the Middle East. Either way, the threat would escalate to a level the world hasn't seen in decades. In the end, a full-scale American retaliation would change everything. The Gulf would no longer be a tense region, it would become an active war zone. The Middle East balance of power would collapse into open confrontation. Oil markets, global alliances, and international diplomacy would all be shaken. The US might win the military battle quickly, but the long-term consequences both strategically and economically would echo for years. This is not a simple decision. It's a high-stakes gamble on a volatile chessboard where one wrong move could ignite the entire board. For now, the world watches and waits. But if Washington gives the green light, if the US decides it's time to end the threat rather than just respond, then the Gulf as we know it may never be the same again.